So we're gonna jump in. We just set aside 30 minutes today, so I want to make sure we get started right away. Thank you all for joining us today for our Casco Bay and the Maine Climate Council, a Casco Bay Matters event. We, Friends of Casco Bay, are hosting this today. We work to improve and protect the environmental health of Casco Bay. And this year, we're really excited. We're celebrating 30 years of working with everyone, working with all of you to keep Casco Bay blue. So we're really excited that we're hitting that milestone this year and look forward to continuing to celebrate that with you all. So I'm Sarah Lyman. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator here at Friends of Casco Bay. And we've got 3 folks on the call today that you'll get to see. You'll see Will Everett is here today with us. He is our Communications and Development Director, and he's going to be helping moderating behind the scenes today. So he might answer some of your questions in the chat or make sure that we get to the questions that we can in the chat. So thank you, Will. And then as well, we have Ivy Frignoca, our Casco Baykeeper, lead advocate for the Bay and eyes, ears, and voice of the Bay. She'll be presenting primarily today, and she'll introduce herself a little bit more as she does that. And then we're really lucky, we're joined by special guest Cassandra Rose, who works in Governor Mills' Office of Policy Innovation and the Future as the Senior Science Analyst and Climate Council Coordinator. So Cassandra has a great background for this. She's managed a policy and communications program for the American Geosciences Institute between 2015 and 2019. She there connected the geoscience community with policymakers at the local, state, and federal levels to support science-based decision-making on issues related to climate, energy, water, mineral resources, and natural hazards. So she's got more than 10 years of academic climate research experience. And so we're excited to have her working at the state level and joining us today as well. So thank you, Cassandra.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So again, thank you to everybody for joining. And Ivy, when you're ready, you can take it from here.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Sarah has already introduced me to you, and what I can tell you about my role as Baykeeper is that I absolutely love what I do and enjoy working with my colleagues to improve and protect the health of Casco Bay. My presentation today will include an overview of Maine's Climate Council with a specific emphasis on the Coastal and Marine Working Group and the draft strategies that we're putting together to recommend to the Climate Council for inclusion in the state's climate action plan. My presentation will be from my perspective as Casco Baykeeper and as a member of the Coastal Marine Working Group, and we're delighted to have Cassandra Rose with us because she can really answer questions from the state's perspective and give you more information about the Climate Council overall. So the Climate Council, one of the wonderful things about it is it builds upon so much pre-existing work that was done both in the public and the private sector. And just to highlight a few of the actions that it builds upon, in 2003 and 4, the state identified goals, target goals to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and put together a plan to achieve those goals. And similarly, in 2010, they put together a plan for how to adapt to the consequences of climate change. And since that time, the state agencies have continued to work together to identify the actions that they're taking every year to achieve mitigation and adaptation goals. Specific to the marine environment, in 2014, a bill was passed to create a study commission, and the commission was tasked with identifying what we know about the impacts of ocean and coastal acidification on Maine's marine species and to identify data gaps. And one of the key recommendations that came out of the study commission report was that an ongoing council be created. And that did not occur in 2015, but what did occur is that a group of us got together and created a wholly voluntary partnership called the Maine Ocean and Coastal Acidification Partnership. And this included people both from government, including the legislature and the departments of environmental protection and marine resources, and researchers and managers and people who care like us up and down the coast who were working on these issues. And since 2016, the MOCA partnership has worked effectively to share the research on new issues and to bring everybody together twice a year in symposia and workshops to sort of ground truth our research, talk about how we're doing it, and talk about what should be done with the data. The culminating step that this voluntary partnership took prior to the Governor's Climate Council was that we received a grant from the Broadreach Foundation last summer, and we brought together the people who'd been most active in the MOCA partnership for a series of meetings over the summer. And these meetings also included people from the governor's staff. And the goal of those meetings was to sort of say, what have we been doing to address ocean climate change? And you can notice that we went from just looking at ocean acidification to really looking at ocean climate change in a broader context. So what have we been doing, and what do we see as sort of the next steps that should occur? And we were asked to do this by the governor's staff so that the voluntary work of MOCA could also be part of the foundation that the Climate Council built upon. What you see on the side of this slide are the overall themes that emerged during our stakeholder meetings. The actual recommendations that are included in the MOCA report ended up being woven into the recommendations of the Coastal Marine Working Group, which I'll get to very shortly. So LD 1679 is the Governor's Climate Council bill. And what's so brilliant about this bill is it creates a council in perpetuity that is mandated to come up with a 4-year action plan. And every 4 years has to come up with a new plan. And every year, the state has to report to the legislature how they're meeting the goals set forth in the plan. And no longer are mitigation and adaptation separate. Both of those topics need to be covered in this climate action plan. And it also needs to weave together all sectors so that we're looking at our environment and our economy in totality. So for purposes of this plan and for our discussion, it's important to know what mitigation and adaptation mean in the context of the Climate Council. And mitigation is basically our efforts to reduce or prevent the emission of greenhouse gases. And this can be achieved in one of two ways, either by literally reducing the sources, like emissions from our cars or our power plants, or by identifying means to capture carbon. So plants use carbon dioxide to photosynthesize, and so we can look at the capacity of our forests, our salt marshes, our eelgrass beds to absorb carbon. And what you see in the middle of this slide here are the target levels set by LD 1679 for us to meet. And note 1990 gross annual levels. So what do these targets mean? Well, this dotted line here is what our 1990 baseline emissions level was. And this green line here is how we've been reducing our carbon emissions. And you can see here and here the 2030 and 2050 goals. And this is a projected trajectory of how we can meet those goals. And it's up to the working groups and the Climate Council to recommend actions to help us achieve these goals. But this is kind of what's meant on the mitigation side. On the adaptation side, that's our ability to anticipate the adverse effects of climate change and act to prevent or minimize the harm, or to take advantage of opportunities. So this slide actually shows clammers anticipating an adverse impact and acting to prevent the harm. So with rising ocean temperatures, there's more green crabs. And so these clammers are putting out boxes to protect juvenile clam spat from predation by green crabs. An example of taking advantage of an opportunity is if we get a lot of a new fish species moving in because of warmer ocean waters, maybe we can create a commercial fishery around that. So the structure of the Climate Council has an overall council at the top that represents all of the different sectors. And underneath of that council is a science and technical subcommittee. Those are the experts across all of the subject matter who put together the data and economics upon which recommendations and actions can be based. And then there are 6 working groups, and those are listed below, and highlighted in yellow is the Coastal and Marine Working Group, of which I'm a member. The Coastal and Marine Working Group works very closely with the Science and Technical Subcommittee because we were charged in part with making recommendations about monitoring. And I expect we will be working closely with the Community Resilience, Public Health and Emergency Management section because so much of their work concerns the impacts of sea level rise and harmful algal blooms and things such as that. So without further ado, the Coastal and Marine Working Group has a little over 30 members representing all kinds of backgrounds. You can access a list of our membership on the Climate Council webpage. And we were tasked with looking at a variety of topics, effects on our tourism, effects on our ports, effects on our fisheries, on our coastal habitat. So we were charged with looking at these various topics, and we broke ourselves into subcommittees to really hone in on our areas of expertise and putting together recommendations. So this is your warning, pay attention. I am now going to go through some of the draft strategies that we have developed. And the reason I'm giving you this notice to pay attention is that after I run through the strategies that we've developed, you will be participating in a poll to share some of your thoughts about those draft strategies, and then you'll be given a chance to ask both Cassie and I questions about the draft strategies and other matters relating to the Climate Council. So fair warning, here I go. So these are not in particular order yet, but know that each group is really asked to limit their recommendations to 4 to 6 because there's so much that has to be incorporated in the climate action plan. So these are sort of broad topic recommendations with a lot of specificity under them. So the first recommendation was to really coordinate and consolidate the mapping, monitoring, and modeling efforts. So this really builds upon what MOCA was doing and others, but frankly, we were the network in Maine that was trying to coordinate all of the monitoring and put it together. But this would be more of a state-led effort, and data would be collected in one place. And the purpose of this data would be to inform decision-making, to test success, and to test pilot projects. So how would this information get used? Well, we are recommending the creation of an information exchange. So you would have a database in a place that people could go. There would be legislative briefings. There would be workshops for municipal officials or others that need access to sound information to make decisions for their businesses or their municipality and so forth. And concurrent with the information exchange is a strategy recommending creation of a Maine Marine Business Council. And this would be on the business side, and it would be broken down by sector, and that it would, as a way to disseminate information to various marine-related businesses and to help them with pilot projects or strategies for adapting to climate change. As a corollary to the Business Council, there is a strategy to adapt how we're managing fisheries. So this may be things like looking at how we regulate fisheries, using enough data to look at siting decisions for aquaculture, looking at shifting how we do fisheries management, that sort of thing. And this strategy is still evolving and is one that is ripe for some more input. To help with infrastructure, there's a working waterfront infrastructure recommendation, and this is sort of a revolving loan fund so that municipalities could have the funds to make their infrastructure climate ready. And then climate adaptive planning and management using nature-based solutions. Again, you can see why I presented the data first and the means to disseminate it so that it can support these later recommendations. This is using what we have in our natural environment to help us adapt to climate change. So preserving and protecting habitats that provide us with resiliency, doing a thorough review of laws to reduce stormwater pollution and nutrient loading, putting in bigger culverts to have better water flow. That's what this strategy deals with. And finally, as you can tell from everything I've presented, a lot of what happens in the marine environment is on the adaptation side. And the blue carbon optimization strategy was really our big one on the mitigation side. So a lot of the really big items for mitigation, especially in a first plan, are going to be to reduce land-based transportation, carbon emissions from that, and help with home energy costs. So our blue carbon optimization is saying that really doing a study of the salt marshes and eelgrass beds and their capacity to capture carbon. We know that it's fairly high. And realizing that if we do that, if we improve and protect the health of these habitats, we are also doing so much more on the resiliency and adaptation side, because these habitats are critical to the health of so many valuable species. So this quick overview is one opportunity for you to get involved, but there are many other ways for you to be involved in the Climate Council. This calendar are some of the dates in my personal calendar for being involved with the Climate Council, and I want to highlight a few for you. So right now in April and May, that's when the working groups are going out to people such as yourself and soliciting feedback on our draft strategies. From May through October, the Climate Council as a whole, and Cassandra can tell you a little bit more about this, we'll be holding a series of public meetings to really get feedback from the public on all aspects of the strategies in the Climate Action Plan. Two really big deliverable dates for you to know about are that on June 17, all of the working groups are due to deliver our draft strategies to the Climate Council. And then we'll continue our work in our groups, but the Climate Council will then begin weaving these strategies together into an action plan that will get delivered to the governor and the legislature in December. So I hope you paid attention and took notes, because I am going to turn things over to Sarah to involve you in a poll right now.
Hi, everybody. So I'm going to launch this poll. The question is, which of the strategies that Ivy just presented today rises as a top priority for you? And each of the strategies that Ivy spoke about is listed here. So if you want to choose the one that is most important from your point of view. And there's an other option. So if you think of something that was not presented today, then you can check other and put your opinion, what you think is most important and was missed, in the chat. And we'd love to see that as well. So it looks like we need a few more moments here. Oh, great. So many people are participating. Just a few more moments. Yeah, they are all essential. Oh, if you're having a problem participating in the poll, you can list what you think is most important about what Ivy spoke about in the chat, and we'll capture that as well. All right, looks like we've slowed down. I'm gonna end the poll and let you guys all see the results. So it looks like kind of the two rising to the top are climate adaptive planning and nature-based solutions, and then also monitoring strategy with information exchange, but everything got votes. So yeah, well, Ivy, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Okay, so we don't have another question right now?
No, not at this time.
Okay, so that concludes my portion of the presentation. There's a link here that if you copy this, or we can provide this in chat, that you can use to get to the Climate Council webpage, and I will turn this over to Cassandra to tell you a little bit more about other ways you can participate and what you can do through the Climate Council webpage. But while this slide is up and while I turn it over to Cassandra, this is the time for you to, if you haven't done so already, to send your questions through chat to Sarah and Will. And as soon as Cassandra spends a couple minutes just telling you a little bit about your other opportunities, then we'll go into panel mode and we will answer your questions. So Cassandra?
Thanks, Ivy. Yes, so it was really great. It's been really great to see all of your comments and your feedback so far, and thank you all for being here today and for your attention. So we in my office have been rapidly helping the Maine Climate Council adapt to the new reality that we're all in with the COVID pandemic, which is that all of this very important work that is has a very short timeline has to move suddenly to a virtual format. And so in recent, the last 6 weeks or so, we have been working very hard with all 230 members of the Maine Climate Council and its working groups on moving their work online and trying to ensure that we're still getting public participation in all of the monthly working group meetings. So the working groups are continuing to meet very frequently over the next month and a half or so, leading up to that June Maine Climate Council meeting that Ivy mentioned before. And this is hot news right off the presses. We have decided to transition the June 17th meeting from an in-person all-day meeting to 2 shorter webinars on June 17th and 18th, and we will be putting that on our website very shortly. So there are a few ways that you can continue to engage with this process if this is new to you. You're more than welcome to go to our website, which the link has been shared in the chat for, and take a look at all the materials from past meetings and learn what future meetings are coming up as well. This is a publicly accessible process, and we have shared materials, handouts, agendas, and notes from all of the meetings on our website. So you're more than welcome to take a look and to attend the future meetings, which are generally all going to be held on Zoom platforms. You're also very welcome to listen in on the June 17th meeting. And my office is working very hard to transition, to work on a transition of our public engagement strategy into a virtual format for this summer. Unfortunately, that has pushed back our plans for wider public listening sessions from April and May into the summer. But if you are interested in learning about when the opportunities to learn more and provide more feedback on the entire Climate Council process will take place, I encourage you to visit our website and sign up for our monthly newsletter, which we will also be sharing special alerts when there are big events like public listening sessions coming up. Finally, you're more than welcome to submit a comment on our website. We have on the Maine Climate Council page, there is on the left-hand side, there's a little toolbar and it says contact the Maine Climate Council. And you can submit a comment to a specific working group or to the Climate Council as a whole, or feel free to email us at maineclimatecouncil@maine.gov. We are collecting those comments and they will be given to the working groups and the Maine Climate Council members for incorporation into the process of selecting and prioritizing the strategies that go into the final climate action plan. So I know that was a lot,
Thanks so
and
much, Cassie. I
I'll
just
turn it back
realized
over
the
to you.
time, so I wanted to get it back to Sarah so that we actually had some time for people to ask some questions. And we'll make all that information available to all of you who attended this again. So Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah, those links that Cassie was just talking about are in the chat, and we'll be following up with them. So if can both of you just briefly talk about climate change is so huge and daunting? Like, what gives you some hope?
So part of what gives me hope is how many people care about this. There's 230 people on the Climate Council, and that is a small fraction of the people who want to be on the Climate Council and want to be doing this work. And it really gives me hope how much everybody cares and is willing to make changes.
Yeah.
Cassie?
I'm on the same page, Ivy. There is just so much energy and commitment to getting things done and getting a plan and then implementing a plan to address the sources and impacts of climate change in the state of Maine. The governor's office is part of a great network called the U.S. Climate Alliance, where we talk to 25 other states around the U.S. who are also committed to the Paris Climate Agreement goals. And Maine we're a small state, but we have the most aggressive timeline of any of the states who are trying to do climate action plans right now. And I think even though we're small, we're doing some really cool thinking that a lot of other states and countries are paying attention to. So I'm just so impressed and grateful for all of the time that our working group members and the public are putting into this process, particularly with how challenging that is right now. So thank you all for being here, and thank you to anybody who's come to our meetings. We really appreciate it.
So Sarah, I am willing to stay on the call for an extra 5 or 10 minutes if we want to do questions, if there's a number of questions and if people are interested in that.
There is a number. Okay, great. So what about budgets? What kind of budgets are being contemplated for these items? That was one of the questions we had.
So again, I'll let Cassie answer that in a broader sense. From the working group perspective, we have been asked to identify potential funding sources and to be contemplating budget in our recommendations. And that's part of why we're looking to build upon existing efforts and to collaborate and make existing efforts work together. So we're identifying funding sources where we can, and then Cassie, I'll let you answer that from the state perspective.
I think you phrased that really well, Ivy. We're looking at all options. I think particularly in this rapidly changing reality of the COVID crisis, that's going to have an impact on state revenues around our country. And so we're really thinking hard about how can we focus on having a green recovery? How can we focus on rebuilding our economy in a way that makes us more resilient to climate change and reduces our contributions to it? So I know the working group members are thinking about this, and this is going to be a big topic for the Maine Climate Council once they start getting together over the summer.
So another question we had was, do you anticipate an effect on ocean impacts resulting from the current economic and industrial slowdown?
So, okay, I think I understand the question. And if I understand the question, it's, do we expect to be able to measure a change from this period of slowdown in the ocean environment? Or to see
I think, do you expect any changes? I don't know about measuring it, but generally,
yeah. So I just want to say as a precursor that it's heartbreaking to think that to even try to link the COVID crisis and benefits to climate change, because it's just with people getting sick and dying and all of the economic problems that it's having for families. It's heartbreaking to link the two, but that's as an aside. I and I also want to say that I'm not a scientist, although I love playing one. But I think that it's going to be short-lived, and what I hope could be long-lived is all of us taking a look at saying, wow, you know, let me give you an example. I was talking with a reporter yesterday who asked me about how we were doing our work virtually, and I was telling her that all of our working group had already decided that at least half of our meetings had to be virtual because we wanted to reduce our carbon footprint. And for the others, we had to prioritize carpooling. And what I hope comes out of this crisis, and what I hope is measurable, is all of us saying, now that we've been through this, what are the ways that we can really reduce our carbon footprint or help with that adaptation? Cassie, you speak on behalf of the governor and the policy. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and I think as a scientist, I can speak a little bit to this. I completely agree. We do in our office, the governor, there is a lot of suffering going on, and there is not a real silver lining here. There are certainly, as from a scientific perspective, there are certainly going to be changes in what we see in the ocean and ecosystems from the fact that there's just not quite as much economic activity. But there was a great Maine calling on this. Andy Pershing from GMRI was on it in early April, and they drew some great parallels to right after September 11th, when all air travel shut down. There was a lot less travel. You definitely saw some changes, but they were short-lived.
Right.
And as I think, as we see our economic activity ramp back up, you know, we'll probably get back to the pre-COVID levels. But so we'll see an impact, but I agree, Ivy, it's probably going to be short-lived. But hopefully, I think we're learning that we can, as Mainers and as country, we can work together to make big changes when we need to in the face of crisis. And so we're hoping we can learn lessons that we can take forward in adapting to climate change as well.
Well, we said like 5 more minutes after. We're at 1:35. I want to make sure that we're respecting everybody's time on the call. There's a lot more questions here, and we plan on looking at those and answering them, and then following up in email with folks. So yeah, I think that's what's probably going to be best, unfortunately. And so I want to make sure that we put those links back in the chat. So I'm going to copy those over, and I'll put those in the chat. But Cassie, if you want to share any final thoughts, like a little short wrap up.
Sure. Well, I think the biggest message I can say is that Governor Mills considers action on climate change to be a very high priority, and she's continued having our office work on it throughout the COVID response. And so we're still committed to maintaining our momentum on climate change, and really thank all of you for your attention and your feedback in the coming months, which will be really helpful for informing the process to make sure that it works for Maine, works for the state, and that we start having significant progress on reducing climate change. So as we said before, you can sign up for our newsletter. You can follow us on Twitter at Maine Climate and GoPIF Maine. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and shoot us an email.
Ivy, any final thoughts from you?
Yes. So I am I'm delighted by your poll response. Gathering data and doing planning is not sexy. You know, it's just, but it is so critical, and it's the foundation. And as Cassie has said repeatedly to the working group members, remember, this is the first 4-year plan.
Mm-hmm.
And what is the foundation and the first steps we have to take? And the first steps we have to take is gathering that right data and making it available in the most efficient means possible so that good decisions can be made. So municipalities don't have to gather the data. We have it. It's available for them to use to do the planning. And so gratifying to see how much you all care and how your understanding of the process. And that, going back to the question I was asked, what makes me hopeful? You make me hopeful. Thank you.
Yeah, so we'll just wrap up saying thank you to everyone who's attending. Thank you, Cassie, for your time and joining us today. Ivy, thank you for sharing through the presentation. Like we said, we're going to follow up with an email tomorrow to everyone who's in the event today. And we'll share those links and instructions on how you can continue to share feedback. And we are also, as we said at the top of the call, we're recording this, so we'll share an email to everyone on our email list of the recording next week. And we're going to get back to as many of your questions as we can in that email. And as always, thank you so much for your support of Friends of Casco Bay. You can find more about our work or support our work at any time at cascobay.org. So thank you all.
Is it possible to add
Thank
just
you.
one tiny more thing?
Sure.
Just so everybody knows, we're capturing the chat and we will share your questions and we'll answer your questions, but we'll also share that information with the state. So don't feel like if we didn't get to your question today, that we didn't capture it and that it won't go to Cassandra and her team, because it will. And so your information is important and will get used. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah,
I just forgot to say that earlier.
Important to add. All right, well, thanks so much. We're going to end this for now, and we'll hear from you in the ways that we talked about. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Bye, everyone.
Great job, Ivy.